The heart chambers function in a coordinated fashion. Their actions are regulated so that the atria contract while the ventricles relax. And then the entire heart relaxes for a brief moment before the cycle begins again. This is called the cardiac cycle. Systole is the act of contraction, and diastole is the action of relaxation. So we have atrial systole while we're in ventricular diastole, and ventricular diastole at the same time as we have atrial systole. This is important for the blood flow to happen in the way that we've previously discussed. During the cardiac cycle, pressure within the heart chambers rises and falls with the contraction and relaxation of the atria and ventricles. When the atria fill, pressure in the atria is greater than that of the ventricles. This forces the atrioventricular valves to open and allow blood to pass into the ventricles. The pressure inside the atria rises further as they contract, forcing the remaining blood into the ventricles. When the ventricles contract, the pressure inside them increases sharply, causing the atrioventricular valves to swing closed, and the aortic and pulmonary valves to get pushed open. Remember, these are like one-way doors that prevent backflow between the chambers and from the vessels. As the ventricles contract, the papillary muscles contract. Remember, the papillary muscles are pulling on the chordae tendineae and preventing the valves from turning inside out or preventing backflow of blood through the AV valves. Now, as the heart beats, we hear sounds. These are due to vibrations in the heart tissue as the blood rapidly changes velocity within the heart. These sounds can be described as the lup-dup sound. The first sound, the lub, occurs as the ventricles contract and the AV valves are closing. The second sound, the dup, occurs as the ventricles relax and the aortic and pulmonary valves are closing. Now, there's a mass of muscle fibers that merge and act as a unit called a functional syncytium. One exits in the atria, the atrial syncytium, and one exits in the ventricles, the ventricular syncytium. This allows the heart to contract as a whole unit. So now the question is, how do these chambers all contract in such a stereotyped way? Throughout the heart, there are clumps of specialized cardiac muscle tissue that conduct impulses throughout the myocardium. These comprise the cardiac conduction system, how the signal is conducted through the heart. The sinoatrial node is where it all begins. The SA node is in the atrial wall. It's a self-exciting mass of specialized cardiac muscle. It's located on the posterior side of the right atrium and generates the impulses for the heartbeat. The impulses then spread throughout the atrium through the junctional fibers. The junctional fibers then lead to the AV node, the atrioventricular node. It's located in the septum between both atria. These junctional fibers are very small and they allow the atria to contract before the impulse spreads into the ventricles. It's sort of like the signal gets to the AV node and slows down, as if there were a large highway at high speed entering a roundabout. At the roundabout, everything sort of slows down a little bit. The AV node is like a roundabout. As everything slows down and then exits on the other side of the roundabout, the signal is then passed down into the ventricles through branches of the AV bundle. This AV bundle then gives rise to Purkinje fibers. These fibers stimulate contraction of the papillary muscles as well as the whole ventricle. So the ventricular muscle all contracts in unison. So the function of the AV node, being the roundabout, is to stall the signal so that we can have the asynchronous contraction of the atria, stall, then the ventricles, which allows the blood to be pushed from the atria into the ventricles before the ventricles contract and push it out to the system. An electrocardiogram is a recording of electrical signal changes that occur during the cardiac cycle. There's a P wave, a QRS complex, and a T wave. The P wave corresponds to depolarization of the atria. The QRS complex corresponds to depolarization of the ventricles and then hides the repolarization of the atria. The T wave then ends the ECG pattern. It corresponds to ventricular repolarization. The ECG or EKG gives us insight into the functioning of someone's heart. Is this electrical conduction pattern happening in the way that it should and causing atrial and ventricular contractions in the way that it should? If there are problems with any of those portions, we might see distortions in the ECG pattern. So the volume of blood that we pump at any one time must be adjusted to the current needs of the body. More is needed during strenuous exercise, so we have to have more output by the heart. In order to do this, the cardiac cycle is very tightly regulated. The SA node is innervated by branches of the sympathetic and parasympathetic divisions of the central nervous system. So remember, it's not always just sympathetic or always just parasympathetic. Both will have inputs. While the sympathetic system is activating, the parasympathetic system will be not turned on. And then when the parasympathetic inputs are there, the sympathetic inputs are not. So the central nervous system controls the heart rate, even though if it were left all on its own, the heart would continue to beat because of the SA node and the AV nodes. Sympathetic impulses can be used to increase the speed of the heart rate, and the heart rate can be decreased by parasympathetic impulses. In a natural state, with no innervation, the heart would beat at about 100 beats per minute. So it actually requires continual input by the parasympathetic system to slow it down. The cardiac control center is located in the medulla oblongata. It maintains balance between sympathetic and parasympathetic inputs of the nervous system. These inputs come from baroreceptors or chemoreceptors. The baroreceptors detect changes in blood pressure, and the chemoreceptors detect changes in blood chemistry, like if there's not enough oxygen or there's too much carbon dioxide. Impulses from the cerebrum or the hypothalamus may also influence heart rate, as do the body temperature and the concentration of certain ions, like hydrogen ions. The control system is very complex and also involves some control of the ventilation or respiratory system. Because, of course, the two systems, respiratory system and cardiovascular system, do work in conjunction to deliver oxygenated blood. If, say, the pressure is too high, then we might need to back off on the heart rate. If the pressure is too low, then we need to increase the heart rate and contraction strength in order to deliver more blood to the circulatory vessels and thus deliver oxygen to the tissues. Take a moment now to diagram the cardiac conduction system, this one here, involving the SA node, the AV node, the AV bundle, and the Purkinje fibers. Also, draw a diagram of an ECG or EKG. The K comes from cardio in German, which is where the system was designed. What does the P wave represent? What does the QRS wave represent? And what does the T wave represent? See what you can do without looking at your notes. Generate some curiosity in your brain. It doesn't matter if you don't get it the first time around, because then you can go to your notes and fill in the gaps. Cover your picture and then do it again. See if your brain can recall and put all the elements in place.